Welcome and thank you all for standing by. At this time, all participants will be in a listen-only mode until the question and answer session at the end of today's conference. During the question and answer session, if you do have a question, you may use *1. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the call over to Ms. Irene Ihir. You may begin.
Hello, and welcome to today's FDA webinar. I am Irene Ihir of CDRH's Office of Communication and Education. On April 25th, the FDA issued the Unique Device Identification Convenience Kit's final guidance. The guidance provides clarity to device manufacturers on the marking of convenience kits with a Unique Device Identifier, UDI. A convenience kit contains two or more different medical devices packaged together for the convenience of the user. Today, Christina Savazar, Regulatory Policy Analyst, and Loretta Chi, Senior Regulatory Counsel, both from the Office of Strategic Partnership and Technology Innovation, will discuss the final guidance. Following the presentation, we will open the line for your questions related to information provided during the presentation. Additionally, there are other center subject matter experts to assist with the Q&A portion of our webinar. Now, I give you Christina.
Welcome to today's webinar. This presentation is about unique device identification of convenience kits and the recently published final guidance on this topic. I am Christina Savizar.
And I am Loretta Chi.
Here is the agenda for this webinar. First, we will briefly discuss the objectives of this webinar, provide a little background, describe the scope of the guidance, and clarify some definitions. These definitions are important to the key policy principles, which we will also outline in this presentation. Finally, we will discuss shareholder considerations and will close by walking through some examples. The objectives of this webinar are to familiarize you with the content of the Unique Device Identification Convenience Kits guidance and to provide our current thinking on how the terms convenience kit and medical procedure kit should be applied for purposes of unique device identification.
The objective of the Unique Device Identification System is to adequately identify devices through distribution and use, and to facilitate post-market requirements such as adverse event reporting and recalls. The UDI system will also enhance studies on device use to produce data that will help ensure safer and more cost-effective devices. The UDI rule requires the label and package of every device marketed in the United States to bear a UDI unless an exception or alternative applies. Convenience kits is one of those exceptions that may apply. If a device is a convenience kit, because remember, all kits are devices, and the convenience kit label bears a UDI, the individual devices are not required to be labeled with a UDI. Keep in mind that exceptions are not requirements. There is no prohibition against your labeling each device in a convenience kit with a UDI. The draft guidance published in January 2016 and the final guidance published on April 26, 2019.
We responded to comments to the draft guidance document by narrowing the scope of the final guidance so that it does not apply to IVDs and combination products. It is important to remember that the guidance that we just published is only intended to be applied for purposes of unique device identification and not for other regulatory purposes where the term convenience kit may be used. Note that there is a guidance on convenience kits that was published in 1997. The purpose of the 1997 guidance was to reduce the regulatory burden on both manufacturers and FDA by providing enforcement discretion when already cleared or exempted devices were being assembled into kits. It permits finished devices that are packaged and labeled consistent with their pre-market authorization to be assembled into kits without the kit also needing pre-market authorization. Although the 1997 document uses the term convenience kit, it does not necessarily align with convenience kit as we interpret UDI requirements.
So, Christina, what is a convenience kit under UDI requirements?
I'm glad you asked. The UDI rule defines convenience kit as 2 or more different medical devices packaged together for the convenience of the user. We interpret this to mean a device that contains 2 or more different medical devices packaged together and intended to remain packaged together and not to be replaced, substituted, repackaged, sterilized, or otherwise processed or modified before being used by an end user.
Packaged together?
Yes, packed, wrapped or sealed in a single container, and the labeler does not intend for the package to be unwrapped or unsealed before it is used by an end user.
Oh. What's an end user?
An end user is someone who is using the device on a patient. An end user can be a caregiver, healthcare professional, or the patient himself or herself.
Okay. So I'm looking at this final guidance document. What's this about medical procedure kits? Are they convenience kits?
They may or may not be convenience kits for purposes of unique device identification. A medical procedure kit typically consists of 1 or more medical devices packaged together to facilitate a single surgical or medical procedure. Whether or not a medical procedure kit is a convenience kit for purposes of unique device identification depends on whether it is a device and the devices in the kit are packaged together and intended to remain packaged together and not to be replaced, substituted, repackaged, sterilized, or otherwise processed or modified before being used by an end user.
So not every medical procedure kit is a convenience kit.
No, and not only that, not every collection of 2 or more different medical devices is considered a convenience kit for UDI purposes. Also keep in mind, as Loretta said earlier, the convenience kit exception is not mandatory. Like any other exception, you, the labeler, make the decision on whether or not to utilize an exception that is applicable to your device. You are free to label the devices in your convenience kit with UDIs. In fact, we encourage you to reach out to your customers to understand their preferences to inform your decision-making on how you will label your convenience kits. Further, when you are submitting the data on the convenience kit to GoodID, it will be helpful for your customers to know what devices are in your convenience kit by including the list of devices in the device description of your DI record.
We realize that interpretations in this guidance means that there are some devices that labelers thought were convenience kits that may not be, and this could impact the manufacturing processes. If you think your processes may be adversely impacted and you have an alternative that will achieve the objectives of the unique device identification system, you may request FDA consider that alternative. Christina, do you think it would help if we gave some examples?
I think it would, Loretta.
Okay, so let's start with a first aid kit sold at retail. Now, this particular first aid kit contains only medical devices because if it contained drugs, then it would be a combination product, and that is outside of the scope of this guidance. So we have this first aid kit that is sold at retail, has 2 or more different models or versions of devices packaged together and intended to remain packaged and not be replaced, substituted, repackaged, sterilized, or otherwise processed or modified before being used by an end user. Is that a convenience kit?
Yes, Loretta. A retail first aid kit, as you have described on the previous slide, is a convenience kit. This means that the convenience kit exception under 21 CFR 80130A11 can be applied by the labeler, and if the label to the affixed to the immediate container of the kit bears a UDI, the label of each individual device within the container is not required to bear a UDI. Note that end users who have purchased a retail first aid kit may choose to purchase other devices to augment or replenish the first aid kit. Labels and packages of replenishment devices should bear a UDI, unless, of course, another exception or alternative applies, because these are not considered part of the convenience kit. Can we try another example to see if it aligns with the interpretation in the guidance?
Okay.
This one is a non-sterile orthopedic device set. It is a collection of non-sterile implants and reusable instruments that are intended by the labeler to be cleaned and sterilized prior to use. They are placed in sterilization trays, and in a surgery, a subset of implants is removed and selected for use. At the end of the case, the instrumentation, the unused implants, and implants to replenish those that were used during the surgery are placed into the sterilization tray to be cleaned and sterilized for potential use in a future surgery. Is this a convenience kit?
No, Christina, it's not. It does not align with the interpretation in the guidance because the devices are intended to undergo cleaning and sterilization prior to each use. Each device must comply with applicable UDI labeling, data submission, and direct mark requirements. Ready for another example?
Yes.
Well, this medical procedure kit is sterile. It contains 2 or more models of a device sealed in a single container. And all those devices, whether or not they're used in a single procedure on a single patient for whom the kit is intended, are disposed of after the procedure. Is this a convenience kit for purposes of UDI?
Let's see. It's a device comprising 2 or more different devices. It is packaged together and intended to remain packaged together without replacement, substitution, repackaging, sterilization, or any other processing or modification before being used by an end user. It is a convenience kit. The next example is a little different. Like the previous example, it contains 2 or more models of devices sealed in a single container, all of which is supplied sterile. The devices are suture and stainless steel instruments. After use by the end user, during which the suture is consumed, the instruments may be reprocessed and reused. Is this a convenience kit?
Yes, Christina, it is. Note that the devices in the kit intended to be used more than once and intended to be reprocessed are subject to direct marking under 21 CFR 801.45. Here's our last example. A labeler manufactures a number of different models or versions of teething rings in varied shapes. The labeler packages 1 teething ring of each model together in a fixed quantity to create an item for retail so that when they're grouped together they have a higher profit margin, and it allows each end user to select and use a particular teething ring. Is this a convenience kit?
I want to make sure I understand. For purposes of this example, is the assumption that the labeler has not created a device in the creation of this package?
You may assume that.
If the devices packaged together are not collectively a device, then this example is not a convenience kit for purposes of unique device identification. Since UDI applies broadly to medical devices, we sometimes get questions about whether a product is a device. Determining whether a product is a device is outside the scope of the UDI program. We refer these questions on. And so this example does not get into these specific details that would go into this determination. It is not always obvious to a manufacturer whether or not their product is a device. As noted in the guidance, if you are uncertain about whether your collection of 2 or more different devices meets the definition of a device, please contact CDRH's 510K program or CBER's Office of Communication, Outreach, and Development.
So we are at the close of the presentation. This slide provides information on where you can find the unique device identification convenience kits guidance and a link to the UDI help desk if you have questions on this or other UDI topics.
The Division of Industry and Consumer Education is also available to answer all questions about medical devices. At this point, we will now be taking questions from the audience.
Operator, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. We would now like to open the lines for any questions. If anyone does have a question on the phone, please hit *1 and record your name when prompted. Again, that's *1 to ask a question on the phone. One moment while we wait for the first questions.
Before we go to the questions on the phone, I'd like to start off with a question that we have gotten from stakeholders since this guidance issued. The scope of the guidance clearly states that it does not apply to IVDs. Loretta, does this mean that IVDs cannot be convenience kits?
No, that's not what it means. What we said in this guidance document is that the guidance document does not apply to convenience kits and combination products. That means that whatever the law or policy was prior to the issuance of this guidance still remains in effect. We can now turn to questions from the audience.
Operator, we're ready for our first question.
Thank you. I was just getting the name for you. The first question is coming from Karen Liu. Your line is open.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Terrific. I have a question about the sterilization aspect of a convenience kit. I'm having trouble understanding if I'm combining two devices packaged together and then they're not yet sterile when I package them together, but then I terminally sterilize them and then I ship them to the end user. Does that still qualify as a convenience kit?
Let me make sure I understand. You're asking that the devices packaged together are intended to be sterilized by the end user?
No, they're terminally sterilized by the manufacturer and then shipped to the end user, who doesn't have to do any further processing or anything.
If they just open the package and use the devices, it sounds like it's a convenience kit for purposes of unique device identification.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. Next, we have Alfred Litlock. Your line is open.
Thank you very much. I have a pneumatic drill and a hose that's in a tray that is sterilized by the hospital each time it's used. I assume since it is sterilized by the hospital, it would not be a convenience package. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
We'll take our next question.
Thank you. Next, we have Darren Summer. Your line is open.
Hi, Aaron Summer. We make convenience kits for Holter monitoring. The really only medical device we have in there is electrode. The rest is batteries, alcohol wipes, scrubby pads. Is this a kit that would be required to use UDI as well?
Wait a minute, I don't understand the question. Are you asking, convenience kit means that the devices within, if your device qualifies as a convenience kit, the individual devices do not have to be labeled with a UDI, but the kit itself does.
It does, okay.
Yes, all kits must be labeled with a UDI.
It did sound, if you were including an alcohol wipe, there might be a question of whether it's a combination product or not. So there are considerations such as that. I think you also mentioned that there were things in the package that were not devices at all. We sometimes get questions about this, like if somebody has a electrode prep kit and they have two or more medical devices and they otherwise meet the definition of a convenience kit, but then they also include a razor blade for shaving or something like that. We don't, just to be clear, we don't expect a UDI to be assigned to any non-device items. The requirement applies to medical devices.
Did you understand that?
Okay, so maybe just for the next person.
Basically, a kit has to have a UDI, and if it qualifies as a convenience kit, then the individual devices are not required to have a UDI. Non-devices are never, anything that is not a device, UDI only applies to medical devices, so if it's not a device, then the UDI requirements don't apply.
Okay, so the electrode itself would make it apply then.
Well, the way you described it, it really sounded like the whole thing was a kit. And yes, the UDI has to be on the kit, but not necessarily on the individual devices. But
Okay.
I can't tell whether this is a convenience kit or not, quite frankly.
If you'd like to,
I guess it is. So we have electrodes, we have alcohol pads, and we seal them in one bag. And then we usually do the UDI label on that bag, and then also UDI label on the box that comes in the case of 20.
Tell you what, we have a help desk, just to make sure that we have all the facts that we need before giving you an answer. Could you mind
Okay.
sending a question through the help desk?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Eric Carey. Your line is open.
Yeah, hi. I have a question. I have a first aid kit with, let's just say, Band-Aid, gauze pads, and non-latex gloves. If I was to now add aspirin to that kit, what would my UDI requirements be?
Well, that would be a combination product, and that is outside the scope of this particular guidance document, and that's what the purpose of this webinar is. If you'd like to know what the UDI requirements are for combination products, I suggest you submit that to the help desk, and we can respond to that question there.
Okay, so that one then, that would shift it to a combination, so then
Yes,
you
when
can't.
when you add a drug, it becomes a combination product.
Okay, you don't have any information on whether that needs UDI or not?
Oh, I have information, but that is outside of this webinar. That's why I'm saying that I would prefer if you submit it through a help desk so that we can answer it separately.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
We'll take our next question.
Thank you. Next we have Steve. Your line is open.
Hi there, Kirk Honor here with Ecolab. We've got a question on these convenience kits. So we've got one kind of kit that has a single medical device in it along with a bunch of non-medical devices packaged together. It's a non-sterile kit. The item that's the medical device could be labeled with the UDI and not the kit. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it
Okay.
makes sense. What is your question?
Question is, do we have to have the external label on the UDI kit? Do we have
Well,
to have the UDI label on the kit level?
The definition of a kit is one or two or more different devices packaged together. And since you only
That's
have a
not-
single device, it's not a kit.
Right, okay, so the UDI would have to be only on the medical device in
Well,
that instance.
it would have to be on the
Cannot-
label of the device, wherever the label is.
Yep.
So if you have the label on the device itself, then that's where it would be. If the label is actually on the outside package of the device somehow, then it would be there.
Yep, understood. Then on our other kind of kits, and that first, actually both of these are class 1 devices. So on that front, what are we looking at in terms of implementation timing for those UDI requirements?
If you go to our website, you'll see under, what is it? Our website just changed completely, so I'm not as familiar with the website as I used to be. I mean, literally changed last week. So I believe that, though, if you go to extensions, alternatives, timeframes, timeline, something like that, you'll see the timelines for class 1 devices. The compliance date was actually 2018, but we issued a immediately in effect guidance document that effectively Okay, I'm going to not be a lawyer right now. Basically,
Yep,
for all
yep.
intents and purposes, your compliance date is September 24th, 2020 for the UDI label and data submission requirements. Not direct
Across
marking.
the board.
Direct marking is what,
2022.
2022.
Okay. Appreciate the help and appreciate the seminar. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Next, we have Augustine. Your line is open.
Yes, my name is Augustine. Thank you. And I just had a question about slide 21. I don't know if it's possible for you to go back, but it was one of the examples, and I just had a question. If you could kind of go into a little bit more explanation as to why that is a kit.
I'm sorry, which example is that?
It's example number 4, and it says a sterile kit containing both single-use and reusable medical device packaged together.
Another key factor here is it's supplied sterile. So like the other examples that are convenience kits, when it is received, it can be opened and used immediately without modification or processing, sterilization.
The definition of a convenience kit is 2 or more different devices that are packaged together and intended to remain packaged together and not be in any way replaced. The individual devices are not to be replaced, substituted, repackaged, et cetera, and that applies to this particular kit because it is supplied sterile. And the devices, both the single-use and the reusable medical devices, originally are intended to be packaged together and for the first time not used until it is at the point, not to be opened until at the point of use. Subsequently, the reusable medical devices will be reprocessed, and that therefore the direct market requirement applies to them.
Okay, that's what it is. Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. Next, we have Pat Crowder. Your line is open.
Hi, this is Kat Crowder. If, as a result of this guidance, we've identified that something we thought was a convenience kit is not a convenience kit, what is the time period that we have in which to rectify the situation?
What class device are you?
I haven't actually done the investigation yet, but it's with class 2s.
Well, the class 2 compliance date was 2016. So my suggestion is that you try to get your device into compliance as quickly as possible. I can't tell you. I can't tell you when the investigator. I don't know what the time frame is for investigators to. I don't know what their work plan is. I'm sorry. I mean, I can't predict how soon somebody would find out that you're not in compliance. And
there hasn't been advice to remove from the market.
Oh, I wouldn't remove them from the market because you can do corrections by in some way putting the barcode on the. I don't know.
I would say, just to remind everybody, final guidance is non-binding recommendation by the FDA. We're telling you how you think you should do this, and we do take into account factors that, this is a new program. People are implementing UDI. If they followed their rationale and how they decided to label things and later found out it was counter to what we were recommending, or for that matter, counter to what their end users needed and needed to make a change. We do see that happen where people are allocating DIs differently to devices they might have thought they needed one for, and then they come back and make changes to records and make changes to their labeling and document, that decision making.
Okay, thank you.
But you still should need to. You need to get in compliance, okay? I mean, don't think. Okay, that doesn't mean that you don't have to be in compliance. You do.
Absolutely.
Just don't panic.
Understood.
Thank you. Next we have Young Jing. Your line is open.
Hello. Yeah, this is a question about the kind of software related. So we have an electronic medical device which has UDI label. The device contains another standalone software device internal, and it has separate classification. Is this effectively a convenience kit by itself, since we have two devices together?
I don't believe this is a convenience kit because I don't think that the devices are packaged together and intended to remain packaged together until used by the end user. I think it's more like either a system or...
It could be a kit that doesn't qualify for a convenience kit exception, because often software is separated to be installed.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Elizabeth Proctor. Your line is open.
Hi. We have multiple Class 2 devices that we label individually with UDIs and sell them individually, but we also sometimes package them together in a bag, and that bag receives a new item number. So we're wondering, does that bag with the new item number need a UDI, or can we just ship it out with all the individually labeled items?
So this is a standard packaging configuration?
Yes, it is. It's something we would stock.
Okay, would you say that it's closer to example 3 or 4, or closer to the example 5, or is example 5 with the teething rings? Is it, are you?
No, they're definitely all different Class 2 devices inside.
And they're not sterile.
They're not sterile, but people can either buy them individually or they can buy a bag of the various devices.
It's not all the same.
It's not always the same. It's various.
Are the devices intended to be used together, or do they have some related intended use, or are they just completely separate?
The patient setup kit.
It's like a respiratory patient setup kit, so yeah, they would typically be used at the same time.
Yeah.
The cannula, oxygen tubing. So I guess the question is that bag a packaging level needing a UDI, or is it just a bag?
Well, if your collection of things is creating a device, it's it has a common medical intended use, and you determine that, then it could potentially be a convenience kit. But keep in mind, under 801.20, device packages also require UDI. So if it's not a kit, because the collection is not a device, it may require UDI because it's a device package, and it's being supplied in a standard configuration of fixed quantity of devices.
But isn't the UDI scheme different for device packaging as opposed to a kit? I mean, isn't the UDI, the assignment of the UDI should be related to the primary DI?
When it's an assorted package with multiple models or versions, it could still be a device package.
So it's a packaging level, basically, that requires a UDI?
It does, but I suggest that you contact the UDI help desk, because there are different ways in which you assign the UDI depending on whether it is a device package under 801.20 or whether it is a kit.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Newport. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you for giving me the chance. So I have a question about a device that we basically has an implantable class 3 device, which is a stent, and then we offer few choices of compatible catheters that when ordered by the physician, we can send it as per the permutation or the choice of that physician. So what do you think our UDI strategy should be?
So every shipment's different?
So we have like a list of 5 catheters which are compatible with this device, implantable device, and we sell it in a box of 2 catheters or 3 catheters with that stent. So all of these are sterile devices. They are non-reusable. So I'm confused whether it is a convenience kit or it can be a kit which is basically termed as medical procedure kit.
Okay, start all over again. So a doctor is ordering the stent, and then
Yes.
the doctor orders one or more catheters.
Yes.
But the
Different
doctor
catheters.
is ordering that separately, not necessarily as you're not packaging them together and selling them together as a standard package.
No,
In other words, you're waiting for
are
the
not
doctor to
selling
tell you
them.
what the doctor wants. They want the stent, and then they
Yes.
want something else, but they may not want anything at all. They may just want the stent.
No, they either have a choice of 2 catheters or 3 catheters. That's it. They don't get to only order the stent. Hello?
Yeah, no, we're thinking.
Okay. Sorry.
I don't think it's a convenience kit because it's not a
Okay.
standard package, but I'm not sure it's a shipping container either.
We do send it out as a kit though.
Well, you send it out as a package per order,
Yep. Mhm.
so it's like they order 2 different items.
Yes.
Yeah, I think and they each have their own separate UDIs, and they have their own separate catalog numbers or other types of internal
Yes, they do.
identification.
Yes, they do, because the catheters specifically are also, separate devices which can be sold separately. So it's not really this, but for these particular projects and this particular manufacturing facility, we only sold them or sell them as kits.
Okay, so no, you're not really selling them as kits. It's more like Amazon. You go to Amazon and you order different items, and they put it in a box and they ship it. Isn't it kind of more like that?
Yes, it is.
That's a shipping
Very close.
container. That's a shipping container. That does not require UDI.
Got it. Okay.
But
Okay,
the
thank you
individual
so much.
devices have to have a UDI.
They do.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Barbara Schweidenbeck. Your line is open.
Hello. I was wondering what technically is considered a different medical device. For example, a variety package of tampons where you get super and regular packaged together.
We're referring to a different model or version of device. In the final UDI rule, there is some discretion given to the labeler to determine what they consider to be under the same set of specifications and what they consider to be a different version or model. The definition in 8013 is that version or model means all devices that have specifications, performance, size, and composition within limits set by the labeler.
So basically, it's up to you, the labeler, to decide whether you have if they constitute different version or models of the device.
Okay. Say I did consider them to be different models or versions, since tampons have different specifications in terms of absorbency per the CFR.
Yes.
Then would that be considered a convenience kit?
It sounds like it could be a device package. Again, if it was a convenience kit, the combination would have to be a device. So the combination itself would have to constitute a device. And there are circumstances of intended use claims or things different than the regular intended use of the individual devices that could put that one way or another. But
It's kind of gray, but I would say it's close to being a convenience kit. Pretty close.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jason Lyon. Your line is open.
Hello, and thank you for taking my call. This is just a question of understanding terms in the guidance document itself, because the word or the acronym UDI is for Unique Device Identifier, and yet in one of the question and answer section on page 6, it actually says device identifier. Are you using those terms synonymously?
Are we using the terms, I'm sorry?
you mean unique?
Are you using those terms? Are you using UDI and DI synonymously?
No, we're not. A UDI is the both the device identifier, the DI, and the PI. If we said DI, then we were probably talking about the device identifier, which is one portion of the UDI. I don't have the guidance in front of me, so I don't know the context in which you're quoting.
It just says how much variation is allowed for, this is question 2 on page 6 of the guidance document. It says how much variation is allowed for different convenience kits to be identified by the same device identifier, DI.
Yes.
If I substitute one device for another, will the kit need a new DI?
Yeah, the device identifier identifies the model or version, and then the UDI also incorporates production identifiers that are the DI portion of the UDI is static for a particular model or version, but the PIs, as you generate UDIs for devices you're producing that have, the expiration date is changing or the lot or batch is changing, the PIs change over time.
Okay, yeah, I think it's in reference to changing out like if you have a kit put together and then you decide to alter that kit by maybe substituting one device with another device, it seems to me that the DI would change, but I'm wondering if the UDI would change also because of that change.
Well, the UDI would naturally change if the DI changes. The question is that if your version or model does not change, the UDIs could still change because the production identifier will change. For every production batch or so forth that the device goes through, each production lot or batch will have a different UDI because the PI portion will change. But the DI portion won't change if the version and model hasn't changed.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. Next, we have Robin. Your line is open.
Hi, I got a quick question here. So we have 4 devices. Each device has its separate item number, a separate model number, and a separate UDI. All 4 devices are going into basically a corrugated box under a new item number. Is that considered a convenience kit, and would it require a UDI? And 3 of those pieces are our partners' components, not our components. Hello?
I think it's difficult to determine whether it's a device package or a convenience kit, because that factor of are the 4 things you put together, a device or not, is a key piece of information that would change the answer to that question.
Yeah, I didn't perfectly understand the question. I'm sorry.
If you want...
Okay, so we have
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll listen.
No, if you can rephrase the question, that'd be great.
Okay, so we have basically four devices. One's a pump, right, and then which we own, and then we have a meter, strips, and Lancets, right, which our partner belongs to our partner. All the pieces all have their own individual UDIs, right? They all have their own item numbers, their own model numbers, but we're kitting them. Well, we're kitting them basically into a corrugated box with a new item number to make it easier for the end user or the customer care people to order. Would that corrugated box require a UDI?
Okay, there are a convenience kit. A convenience kit is a subset of a kit. And it sounds to me like you're putting together a kit. May or may not be a convenience kit, but it certainly sounds like a kit. And a kit is a device which requires a UDI. It doesn't matter what type of packaging you use. That's not relevant. The fact that you're packaging it together at all, and it's these are devices that tend to be having a common intended use in some way. They are intended to be used together. Would indicate to me it's a kit, and therefore would require a UDI.
Perfect, because I put a UDI on it, and I just wanted to make sure I did the right thing. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And again, if there are any questions on the phone, please use *1. Next, we have Stacy Cashmore. Your line is open.
My question was also about the definition of different medical devices, so that's already been asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Alfred Whitlock, your line is open.
Yes, my question has also been answered. Thank you very much. Hello?
All right.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sam. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. Our company manufactures orthodontic brackets, and we have a magnitude of brackets that we sell individually to the end user or to a dealer who sells to the end user. And on certain cases, we'll receive requests from our customers for custom configuration kits. So depending on the prescription that the doctor assigns to the patient and the tooth angulation, et cetera, they will want to pick specific brackets to put together for the course of a treatment for a patient. Now, would that be considered a convenience kit? Because all of the devices are going to be they will remain packaged together until utilized or used by the end user, but they are a custom configuration per se.
Well, they're custom configuration in the sense that the orthodontist has chosen and selected each device that's going to be shipped together, correct? And it will change from patient to patient.
Correct, but the device itself is not customized. We sell the device regardless of if the doctor requests that particular prescription or not. They're just choosing the configuration for the kit, and then we're creating a new SKU. And my thoughts are that it would be considered a convenience kit, but we just wanted confirmation.
The problem with considering each one to be a convenience kit is that I'll tell you what we don't want. What we don't want is you to assign a new DI for every configuration, because then you'll be submitting to Good ID.
It's a lot of records.
And it'll be a lot of records, and that's not going to be useful to anybody. So,
and that's what we're worried about.
Yeah, no, don't do that. Please don't do that. We would prefer you either consider that to be like a shipping, a unique order each time, or you consider all of these configurations together to be a single device, a single version or model of the device. And then you would make the distinction by the PI, the latter batch or whatever. Does that make sense?
So even though there can be countless configurations of different kits or different devices going into one kit.
First of all, I wouldn't call them kits necessarily. I'm not sure that they are kits because each one is so different. A kit is generally something that is a standard. It is a device that the manufacturer or labeler produces continuously, the same thing over and over and over again. You don't do that. You have a different configuration for every patient. And that's not really a kit.
Okay.
Because you don't have a standard version or model.
You would have to put specifications around it. We do have records that you can find if you go to Access Good ID and do a little searching where people have not what we would call custom, but a customizable device. And when they describe their device description and how they've assigned the version or model, it gives the parameters on what their specifications are. May contain 1 or 2 or 3 of these, and one of these 4 things and 2 of these things based on the order of the healthcare professional. And that DI broadly covers the customization of the device. And like Loretta said, the production identifiers would be the one would be the way that you could trace it to. This is the one Dr. Jones ordered for patient A, and this is the one Dr. Smith ordered for patient B.
I see, because each item that's going to the doctor would be its own unique device, and they could vary from class 1 to class 2. So that's why we're trying to make sure we lock this down, our understanding, so that we're assigning for the upcoming kits that are, or not kit if it's not a kit, but for the upcoming configurations that are class 1s, if we're going to have to register for each, in quotations, kit, that we're doing that appropriately.
What do you mean by register?
Device. So each item that's in this assembly is within its own right, is a device on its own that we manufacture and we sell. So the doctor may be requesting this configuration, but we may sell this configuration again if that configuration is requested by someone else, if that makes sense.
Well, does it have a catalog number or a part number? Or do you advertise it? Or is it just so happens that another doctor asks for the same order?
Asks for the same order would be the scenario.
How would you keep records? I really think that it's just happenstance.
It's a nightmare, but we have been keeping record of it. It's just we're trying to understand if.
Okay, I'm gonna say again. What we do not want is for every single configuration to be assigned a DI, and then you to submit a DI record in Good ID for every single configuration under the sun. That would not be productive or constructive or useful to anybody. Not you, because you'd have to pay all this money to get it done, and not Good ID because we'd have a lot of records, and not to the patients because they wouldn't know what to do with all that information. So if there's any way you can consolidate your DIs into at the very least broad categories of kits or devices, I think everyone would appreciate that.
Okay. That's helpful. I appreciate the elaboration.
Okay.
Thank you. Next we have Clyde Dotton. Your line is open.
Hi. If I understand correctly, a Class 2 non-sterile individual device that is identified uniquely by an individual UDI, if it's packaged together with other items or medical devices that are UDI, the overall package does not require a UDI assignment, correct?
No, that's not correct. That's not correct.
Okay.
It depends on why
guess-
you've packaged them together. It depends on whether
They're sold.
It depends.
They're sold to an individual or a dealer, and it's sold as a package. So if the individual items in that package have unique UDIs because they can be sold individually, does the overall package require a UDI assignment?
It may. It may. It depends on why you've packaged them together.
Because they have to be used as a system.
Well, then you definitely need to have a UDI on the package.
On the overall package?
Yes.
Okay, so even though they individual items have its own unique UDI assignment?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll take our next question.
Thank you. Liz Vo, your line is open.
Hi. So I think I have a pretty good understanding of what the convenience kit is. What if it's a component of a system and it's a software package and maybe other reusable devices, and we want to sell them as a kit? Would that require UDI?
Yeah, I mean, if all the various constituents together creates a device, it requires a UDI.
But it's not, like, individually, they're not a medical device. Like, say, a software package, it's not a medical device in and of itself. It has to be installed to a system.
Constituents together to create a device do not individually themselves have to be a device to create a device. Right? I mean, you could have something that is not considered a device, and then you can have something else that is not considered a device, but you put them together and it's a device. Then it's a device, and then it needs a UDI.
So, I mean, together they're not a device. It needs to work with a system that's packaged separately. It's not going to be part of this kit. So, is this kit, do you still consider this kit a device that it requires a UDI?
Can you send this to help desk?
Yeah, I think there's some specifics
I
here
think
we have
I
to
think there's some
explore.
facts here that we need to explore a little bit more.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Next we have Karen. Your line is open.
Yes, thank you very much. I am calling to ask, we make both Class 1 and Class 2 devices, and they're first aid type kits. Do we have to have a unique UDI for each color of the bag that we put those first aid kits in?
That depends on whether you consider each color a different version or model of the device. Personally, we would like it if you did not, but that's up to
Right.
you.
That's what I was getting before when you said to kind of consolidate and use broad descriptions. So the items inside these bags are exactly identical, but sold in a different colored bag.
I will tell you this, that I don't know who your issuing agency is, but your issuing agency may have standards that you have to follow. Your issuing agency may have standards which you may need to follow, which may require you to have different DIs for each version or model, for what you may not consider as a version or model, but they may. But honestly, we as FDA would prefer that you did not consider them different versions or models. But you have to check with your IA too.
Okay, and when you say issuing agency, will you please define that?
Well, there are three. You are required to use the system of one of three FDA accredited issuing agencies, and they are
okay.
They're listed in the FDA website.
I understand now. Yes. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. Next we have Divya. Your line is open.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a very similar question to the gentleman who asked prior to this, where I have a two-class 2 medical devices which can be individually sold. They both wear individually a UDI on them, but we have a configuration under a separate part number where they are bundled together. So my question was, do we need a separate UDI for this when we bundle it together? Sounds like the answer to that is yes, based on the previous answer. Did I get that right?
Yes.
And then I guess the second part to my question is, if the part number where we bundle together is a separate UDI, does that UDI number have to now show up on the lower level 2 products as well, or can they have their own separate UDI?
That is a packaging configuration question that that's a little bit out of my area.
What you're talking about is that each of your 2 items has a label with the UDI, and then they're in a package together also with the UDI. Do the labels of the individual devices have to refer to
the next
the
level
UDI of the package? Is that what you're asking?
Correct, like the direct part mark that goes on these 2 individual products.
There is no way to link the individual devices to the package.
When there's an assorted package, there's not an easy way to do that. You're not required to put on the label of the 2 separate devices the UDI of the package it may also come in. But when stakeholders are looking at your data and access Good ID, it's useful, like in the device description, to make that relationship clear to people. Some people will put, this is a package that contains DI, XYZ, and DI, and they list the device identifiers in the device description so that people can go to the individual device records for more information. Or some people in the reverse in their device description will say, this is also sold with 2 other devices, under this DI. Just so it's clear when people are trying to find the record for your device, and it's not because they have the label in front of them, they're scanning, they're trying to match up to their item master or something like that, and they understand exactly what the record pertains to.
So did you recommend that when we do the Good ID submission that we, for the third part number, I'll say, where these 2 are bundled together, that we would clarify that this is for 2 separate products?
You would clarify that in device description.
Yes.
Okay, got it. So if that's the case, if we clarified it in the device description, we would not have to necessarily match the UDI of the package where it's bundled together to be the same UDI on these 2 individual.
You wouldn't be able, not only would you wouldn't even be able to. That would be impossible.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Billy Zarconi. Your line is open.
Other kit components separately. Never the pouch.
Mr. Zarconi, your line is open.
I believe that's a correct statement.
So if I was to ask them a question, say we have multiple items in our kit, but we consider only one of those items to be a medical device, is that considered a convenience kit?
The answer, their answer is going to be no.
Hi, Mr. Zarcone.
Mr. Zarcone? Hi, sir. Your line's open.
Was that Mr. Zarconi you said?
Yes, your line is open for question.
So a real quick question. If we have what we believe is a kit and it only has one medical device in it, but it has multiple items in it, would that even be considered a convenience kit?
No.
No, it has to have 2 or more different medical devices.
2 or more different medical devices. Now, do those 2 or more different medical devices have to be wrapped together in one package, or just in the convenience kit?
Well, if it's in the convenience kit presumably would be a package of some sort.
Okay, gotcha. But still, if only one of those items are a medical device, then it's not considered a convenience kit.
Correct.
Even if they're packaged in 25 individual foil wrap medical devices in that kit.
If they're are they identical medical devices?
Yes.
Well,
Yes, they're identical, and they're foil wrapped in that kit.
Okay, then that's not a kit. Is that a single-use device or a multiple-use device?
And it's not an implant?
Correct.
It's a single-use device and it's not an implant?
You might want...
Well, let him answer. Is that correct?
Yes.
Then you may be able to take a different exception, not the convenience kit exception, but an exception that's in 801.30A3, which basically says that
801.3083?
8.3. A is an apple, 3. So basically it's saying that if you have a single-use device that are packaged, several of them, that are packaged together, they're all the same version or model of the device, and they're packaged together, and they're intended to remain packaged together until used by the end user, then you only are required to have the UDI on the package and not on the individual devices.
Okay, that's excellent. So,
What's the definition there instead of a convenience kit?
It is 801.30. A is an apple. 3. That's the citation. Right. And basically it's saying that if you have multiple single-use devices, all of the same version or model, that are packaged together and intended to remain packaged together until used by the end user, and these are not implants, then you are not required to have the UDI on the individual devices. You may have the UDI on the package itself.
Which we do already. Right.
Okay, I have a question about that that set of devices. This is a diagnostic device. One example, one version would be a pregnancy test. And each of those pregnancy tests are single-use devices, individually foil pouched, and they go into a box of 25. And that box of 25 is sold under its own UDI. In that box, we also include what I'm going to call control swabs. The control swab is used to ensure that the operator in the laboratory or physician's office can run a test and get a predetermined positive or negative pregnancy result.
Yeah, I know what a control swab is. So
Yep.
So is that control swab a separate device?
Well, that's my question. In the context of it being a component of that kit, is that control swab considered a medical device on itself?
Is it separately approved or cleared by the FDA?
No, it's cleared as part of the product, the kit product.
Well, yeah, first of all, IVDs are outside of the scope of the convenience kit guidance. I would suggest that you contact your OIR, or what's no longer OIR because we've gotten reorged, but I would contact what used to be your OIR reviewer to figure out whether that is considered a single device, whether the control and the pregnancy kits themselves are considered together a device, or whether they're considered separate devices.
Okay. He's thinking.
So because it's an in vitro diagnostic, are we completely disconnected from the convenience kit?
Well, when you say
Requirement?
completely disconnected, the guidance document does not apply to IVDs either way. Okay, it's like that. Just pretend the guidance document for purposes of IVDs, the guidance document doesn't exist. So whatever policy was in place, whatever the regulations were in place prior to the issuance of this guidance document, it's still in effect.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
Super. Thank you for this webinar. It's been great.
Okay.
Thank you. And our last question comes from Lacey Stewart. Your line is open.
Yes. So the question I have for you guys, we are a custom kit manufacturer that takes multiple finished medical devices and we package them and then they're sent off for ethylene oxide sterilization. So we have two different types of packs. We have those packs that go through that process of sterilization, and then we have packs where we package multiple sterile finished devices into a bundle kit that is then shipped to the customer that way. So right now we have all of those that we do have listed with UDI. But my first question for you is, so one of the slides that you went over talked about an exception for a sterile kit. So I was hoping you could clarify that just a little bit on the requirements for that sterilized kit.
Well, a kit, the reason why we talk about sterile is because if the kit is sterile and it isn't intended to be opened until the point of use, and then after that, it's no longer sterile, right? So it's been all the contents have been compromised, and so at that point, after the procedure's over, everything gets disposed of. I mean, that's the kind of the point we're trying to make there.
So we're saying that would be an exception then?
That would be a convenience kit.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so that does meet that, which would require the UDI. And so the same for the non-sterile bundle that has all sterile individual components, but the kit is supplied without going through ethylene oxide sterilization. So now let's talk about those same types of kits. Let's say that sterile convenience kit has 10 widgets inside it, and I decide to exchange one of those 10 widgets for a different widget. And internal tracking, we show that as a revision. Would that require us to register a new UDI for that pack?
Okay. Well, I need to go back to your original question, though, because you said requires a UDI. They all require a UDI. Okay, the convenience kit exception is not whether the kit requires a UDI. All kits require a UDI. All devices require a UDI. The exception is whether if it qualifies as under the exception, is whether the individual constituents within the kit require a UDI. Okay, well, I need to make that really clear.
Okay.
Okay, so that's why we're saying that the sterile kit, once all the constituents in there, once it's open, they're compromised and the whole thing gets thrown out. So, okay, now the question of what happens when you make a revision to a kit and whether that requires a new DI, well, that goes back to whether you consider that a new version or model of the device.
So if internally, we number that item, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then if we revise that kit, we put a 001 at the end. So if we're internally on our labeling or showing the revision, would that require us to register a new DI?
How you do your internal numbering system is not going to make the decision for us whether you do or do not require a new UDI. Your numbering system is your numbering system. It's whether you consider it a new version or model. So if you consider adding a 0001 to the end of your catalog number or whatever constitutes a new UDI, then a new version or model, then it's a new version or model. I mean, it's really up to the discretion of the labeler. It's not up to us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And that was our last question.
Thank you. This is Irene I hear. We appreciate your participation and thoughtful questions. Today's presentation and transcript will be made available on the CDRH Learn webpage at www.fda.gov/training/CDRH Learn by Thursday, May 30th. If you have additional questions about today's presentation, please use the contact information provided at the end of the slide presentation. As always, we appreciate your feedback. Following the conclusion of today's webinar, please complete a short 13-question survey about your FDA CDRH webinar experience. The survey can be found at www.fda.gov/CDRH webinar immediately following the conclusion of today's live webinar. Again, thank you for participating. This concludes today's webinar.
Thank you all for participating in today's conference. You may disconnect your line and have a great day or a great evening.